Our climate is changing, and it's having a chilling effect on our public discourse in America. The issue has created a small but organized and well-funded opposition that most experts say simply denies proven science. But with support from some high-level leaders in government, the so-called climate change deniers have changed the debate from science to politics. And now the scientists admit they need to step up and publicly represent their work.
For something that's so obvious to scientists, the Earth is changing, the climate is warming, these are the changes we see coming. It seems like a no-brainer that we should be working real hard on it. But then politics enters, and there's certain people that don't believe that, and it's, you know, the wheels are right now turning in the wrong direction.
Jack Sullivan was the director of science programs at the Wisconsin Department of Natural Resources from 2000 to 2015, and he helped build that unit into one of the leading environmental science teams in the world.
Staff were beginning to come to me in the late 1990s talking about, geez, we should be looking and spending a little bit more time understanding how Wisconsin's climate might be changing and how it might be impacting the state's natural resources.
Sullivan and his staff set about studying the effects climate change was having in Wisconsin, and along with UW researchers and other experts, collaborated on the 2011 Wisconsin Climate Change Impact Report.
We were one of the states that was running out in front in the country in terms of talking about the impacts of climate in the environment.
So we were doing what we were told, and up until 2010, this was one of the highest priorities of the department, to work on climate change adaptation, figure out how we were going to adjust.
But priorities changed when Republicans won majorities in the state assembly and Senate and the governor's office.
When the new administration came in 2011, we were never told to stop.
That year was John Lyon's 26th year as a DNR fish researcher when Wisconsin's new government leaders started to dismantle the world-renowned science program.
It, along with the communications program, were cut on the order of 30 to 50% in a fell swoop. According to the people who actually proposed these cuts, one of the reasons is that they said we were spending too much time working on climate change. And so I think there's a direct relationship there.
Lyon says lawmakers used job cuts to send their unwritten, unspoken message that they wanted climate change and other controversial research stopped.
You know, we're not stupid. We realize that there are things going on, and certainly the work has scaled back dramatically. But to this day, as far as I know, there's nothing in writing, and there's nothing even verbal that says don't do this.
It's a real thorny time and challenging time for DNR staff in the area of climate change, because the governor's, obviously his position is there isn't any, so it's difficult when you work for the governor to turn around and say there is.
I remember being told that we would no longer refer to it as climate change or global warming when the new administration came in, that we would say it was a changing climate, thereby getting away from the human impacts.
As editor of the DNR's subscriber-funded Wisconsin Natural Resources magazine, Natasha Kosalki was instrumental in spreading the news about research, including climate change studies being done at the agency.
Was there ever any explanation as to why you can't say climate change, why you can't say global warming, why we're pulling this story?
No, not really. There was never a dialogue. It was more you're being told, these are the terms we now use.
In his 2017 state budget, Governor Walker proposed eliminating the long-running magazine as a way to save money, even though it's funded by subscribers, not tax dollars. The legislature saved it, but cut it from 6 to 4 issues a year, with editorial control by the DNR communications director, a political appointee.
The DNR was changing.
Ron Seeley covered the agency as a science reporter for the Wisconsin State Journal from 1978 to 2013.
I don't think there's any argument now that the agency did really clamp down on the discussion of climate change and so forth. I did stories that actually confirmed also that they were denying researchers' requests to go to climate change conferences.
The denials included the DNR removing references and information on climate change from its website.
I don't understand that at all. It's information. And that's what we're supposed to provide. This is what taxpayer dollars go for, to provide the best possible information to people to use.
But Seeley points out that even with a DNR in denial, key state agencies are factoring in climate change as they plan to spend your tax dollars.
Which was ironic because at the same time you have engineers in the Department of Transportation now engineering bridges to take into account climate change.
Climate change references and information were also dropped from the Wisconsin Public Service Commission website. One state agency has actually added climate change language, though. The Wisconsin Division of Emergency Management uses the term climate change on its website and includes a statement acknowledging the human impact. Agency spokesperson Lori Getter says they were directed to do that in their new 5-year preparedness plan by the Federal Emergency Management Agency, but that's the exception to what appears to be the rule in Wisconsin.
If you look at the Department of Natural Resources now, climate science and adaptation and climate change is no longer a priority for the agency. It's disheartening, but I guess it's not surprising.
Jack Sullivan's last years at the DNR were spent watching his world-renowned science team broken up. A staff of more than 100 decimated to little more than a dozen. He says climate change alone wasn't the reason, but it was a factor.
It's pretty upsetting to all of us to see.
George Meyer was Wisconsin DNR secretary from 1993 to 2001, and he says the cuts and culture change at the agency have left it a shell of its former self.
I know from talking to some of those people, they were deeply offended by that, and just, you know, they have to do their job. They can't say anything about it, but they've talked to a lot of other people outside. Hypothetically,
we can continue to work on climate change, but we don't have the staff, we don't have the expertise, and there isn't an incentive for it. In fact, there's an incentive not to do it.
In July of 2017, John Lyons retired early from what he describes as his dream job when DNR administrators decided to move him out of the area where he'd worked for the past 32 years. No current DNR scientists we talked with would agree to an interview on this. It's not just the DNR where climate change has affected public discourse in Wisconsin.
Alleged that I had engaged in an act of theft against the citizens of the state of Wisconsin for speaking the words climate change during work hours.
Tia Nelson is the former executive director of the Board of Commissioners of Public Lands, a state agency that manages a trust fund for public schools that includes some public forest land that generates money. The BCPL website included a description of how climate change was threatening the native trees. The daughter of former Wisconsin governor and Earth Day founder Senator Gaylord Nelson says her belief in climate change almost got her fired in 2015 when newly elected treasurer Matt Adamczyk immediately tried but failed to vote her out. In an email, Adamczyk declined our interview request but wrote, quote, "I don't have any control over climate change in my capacity as state treasurer. For this reason, I am not interested in an interview on this topic." The DNR secretary through all of this, Kathy Stepp, also said no to our interview request. Governor Walker and State Senator Tom Tiffany, who initiated much of the science cuts at the DNR, did not respond to our repeated requests for interviews. But that doesn't mean every Republican denies climate change.
When Governor Walker, got rid of the scientists at the DNR, I think that was a mistake, and I think it's something that we'll pay for in the long run.
Former Republican State Senator Dale Schultz says he is frustrated and disappointed that current GOP leaders have broken with the party's past commitment to the environment and conservation that was solidified by Republicans like Abe Lincoln, who created the National Academy of Sciences, Teddy Roosevelt, who inspired the national park system, and former GOP governors Warren Knowles and Tommy Thompson.
It's clear that Wisconsin is pulling back from its heritage of caring about the land and the environment. I think a lot of it has to do with what I regard as sort of a hostile takeover of the Republican Party by members of the old Conservative Party or American Party, the John Birch Society.
Even though polls show most people do agree with the climate change scientists and their findings, those researchers are being put to the test like never before. Next, their struggle and solutions to the climate change effect.